Hello and welcome back to coverage of the third Louisville Cube League Cubevitational. This is the second video out of 5 total with each covering one draft of the event, so keep that in mind if you're trying to watch the entire event in order. If you haven't checked out the other videos in this series or just need a refresher, the full summary of the Cubevitational is available in the first video of the series, linked in the description below. Today we'll be covering the second draft of the tournament, the Premodern Cube. So for anyone not familiar, the Premodern Cube is meant to showcase cards that are legal in the Premodern format. For those of you who don't know, the Premodern format includes all sets between 4th edition and Scourge. The format itself does have a ban list, and cards on that ban list are not included in the cube. For this draft, we did use a previously curated version of the cube, not a Louisville Cube League original. The link you can see on the screen. There are a few special rules with this cube, such as Accumulated Knowledge and Flame Burst give you 2 additional copies when drafted, as well as drafting Cunning Wish or Burning Wish alongside a Mirari gives you an additional copy of that wish that must stay in your sideboard. There are a couple of rules that this cube has, including Mana Burn and Damage Using the Stack, which were rules in Magic when these sets were standard legal that we did not use in this draft. Just for a quick refresher on the standings of the overall event before we hop into our matches. After the rotisserie draft, we have Bats with a 3-1 record, and then 6 other participants sitting at 2-2, followed up by Bryan with a 1-3 record. Just for a reminder, we are using game win percentage as the tiebreaker. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump right into our matches.
Hello. Back this time with the Premodern Cube, and my name's Joey.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Prose.
And Scott, why don't you tell us, as we're getting started here, what we're seeing Bats playing this time around?
Yeah, so Bats' strategy is black-green sort of reanimator build. He also has Oath of Druids as an additional way to put large creatures into play ahead of schedule.
Dittert over here, right on cue with this Gerard's Verdict is on a white-black kind of discard aggro strategy, so kind of plays into what Bats is trying to do, but with enough disruption, maybe that doesn't work out. So,
yeah, and the benefit here for Dittert is that this, unlike a typical like vintage cube reanimator opponent, our threats are not quite, Archon of Cruelty or Atraxa. We're putting symbiotic worms into play and spirit mongers, so maybe a little bit easier to handle even if they show up ahead of schedule.
True, but just like the threats are a little bit worse, I imagine the removal's not as great in this cube.
That is true. It is trickier to remove these permanents, but they don't. Archon of Cruelty ends the game in 1, maybe 2 attacks, and Plan of Darkness got to hit you a couple times.
Did you catch what that was that Bats picked up? It looks like he picked something up off of a Genesis in his graveyard.
yeah, that was the Scion of Darkness.
Yeah, he had cycled it the turn previous.
So, Fitz mana, draw a card.
Yep.
Yeah. That's Premodern, baby. All right, and we tried to slow roll this Oath for Dittert playing a creature. He still hasn't, but Bats was tired of waiting, so it's Icy Manipulator versus Oath of Druids.
A true standoff of Titans in pre-modern Magic.
Given what you said about the threats not being too scary, does Icy Manipulator do a good enough job of kind of invalidating Oath of Druids, since the 1 creature Bats would get will stay tapped?
It certainly could, yeah. That Icy Manipulator is a problem that Bats is almost certainly going to need to address if he has a chance to win this game here.
Harrow here to turn into a little bit of a ramp deck here.
We were talking about his expensive slight card advantage engine, so getting a little bit extra mana definitely going to help if we're just spinning wheels.
Looks like a handful of action, so he's going to pick Buried Alive to really juice the graveyard up over there.
But again, it's not just the graveyard. That Genesis in the graveyard means that we can get some creatures that we just want to end up with in our hand as well.
And given the Oath of Druids in play, you definitely want to leave some large things in your deck as well if you think that's going to trigger ever. So I like, in theory, just grabbing some utility guys that you want to cast. Maybe an Octavia Orangutan if he has it. Doesn't look like he did, though.
I believe it's Twisted Abomination, Symbiotic Worm, and I think... I'm not sure what the card in the middle is.
Twisted Abomination also cycles, right?
Swamp Cycling, yeah.
It does. He's got a mini land tax engine going. It costs a lot more mana, obviously, but in Premodern, you can take those turns to set up and thin your deck.
Yeah, Gerard's Verdict here definitely helped Bats out by giving him a way to get that Genesis into his graveyard. Faceless Butcher is the third card there.
So given that, you have to assume, I would assume anyway, in Dittert's chair, that Bats does not have a creature that can kill an Icy Manipulator, because I feel like that would have been a pretty high priority with that Buried Alive.
I was going to say, it seems telling that he doesn't activate Genesis, but it's just to cast this Unmask here.
Yeah, Bats really has all of his engine cooking. He just needs to play lands every single turn. So while he's here stuck on 5 mana, it's gonna be a little bit slow going.
Sidon cashes in the Skeletal Scrying. Snuff Out, probably a good one to know about.
Selects Mutilate.
Yeah, a bit of a game of chicken here. I imagine nobody really wants to be the first to play a creature, especially not Dittert. Probably seeing the types of creatures that Bats is dealing with, but
Somebody at some point is going to have to, because there's not a lot of non-combat related ways to win.
And it seems like that pressure is on Dittert, since Genesis will just bury him in card advantage eventually.
Yeah, and there's that Twisted Abomination coming back and then getting us another land.
Yeah, black-white in this cube, not a lot of ways to draw extra cards. So while Bats is, activating Genesis and cycling and swamp cycling, Dittert's usually just going to draw 1 card per turn. And there's not a lot more than that he can do outside of the Skeletal Scrying we saw earlier.
But as we've been talking about Bats' mana, Dittert, I guess we would say, is flooded then, because Bats is purposefully building up this mana, whereas Dittert's just sitting on 8 or 9 mana himself.
Yeah, he does have some mana sinks available to him, but so far this game we have not really seen any of that.
I know he's got a few cards in his hand. I have to imagine that it's just unwilling to play into Oath at this time. But that feels like something he's going to have to bite the bullet on eventually, because... Okay, well, there's Living Death, so...
Oh.
Yeah, so, they're just going to get an Oath activation in his upkeep.
It makes sense why we had to select Mutilate earlier.
Yeah, a little bit of a nombo. This Faceless Butcher does have to eat one of his own creatures. Not sure exactly which one he took there.
Well, I say Wrath Protection.
Fair, yeah.
If that was the case, probably would choose Coffin Queen, right?
Yeah. Is Faceless Butcher non-black?
Oh, that's fair. I don't know.
All right, so we're going to snuff out
No, it's just
Sylvanos.
a target creature. Yeah, can't be regenerated from Snuff Out, so...
Yeah. And then we activated Oath, flipping a Necrotol. Bats jokingly asked if he wanted to kill the Symbiotic Worm, but I don't think that's going to be the target. Okay.
Does Necrotol let you not target?
No, you have to. So I guess he didn't want to kill Genesis, and that was the only other option.
I don't remember what the... There is another creature a bit off screen, I believe. I don't remember what that was from the graveyard, but presumably not an attractive target for Necrotol.
I mean, it's got to be rough when your opponent has a bunch of creatures in play and you don't want to cast your Doomblade.
Okay, Triskelion here makes killing that worm a little bit less painful.
Mother of Runes.
Also, killing the worm ensures Dittert will continue to be on the positive side of Oath.
That's definitely true. All right, and using our last white mana here to activate Icy.
Yeah, the Scion is not something you want to get hit by here. Although I guess he doesn't have any targets currently. Oh, it's the Twisted Abomination is the other card off screen. Of course, so wasn't a legal Necrotal target anyways.
Or Snuff Out.
Or Snuff Out, yep.
If Genesis finds its way back into the graveyard at some point, we can just hardcast these things. We can get them back and just slam a Symbiotic Worm into play. So Dittert has a lot of problems to answer here.
Can't Coffin Queen also bring back the worm?
Yeah.
So doing a bit of math here, definitely not the easiest sequence of blocks to work your way through. Board states like this are why they say math is for blockers, I think.
I mean, Triskelion on Faceless Butcher looks like a fairly clean block if you can survive the hit, which it looks like you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creatures on the board, but we're looking at I don't even think this is a lethal attack completely unblocked. But yeah, I imagine this Triskelion is going to take out some tokens here.
Possibly blocking one, killing another.
It's a 1/1 base, so you can block one and kill two. Yeah.
Ah.
Necrotal and Triskelion also blocked tokens, so Ditter's still taking a huge hit here and still has a lot of problems on the board to answer here.
Yeah, questionable what outs exists for him with his board wipe spell already gone. He's going to get an Oath activation. Maybe he has something good he can find off of that.
Yeah. Just a rampant growth there for Bats, who has very few cards left in his library at this point, but
We Oath into a 2/1 Shadow, so not a lot of help.
Not able to block. So
No.
I believe we do still have the ability to live another attack. If we tap the Scion, you block presumably the Worm, the Butcher, and the... Or, I'm sorry, the Worm, the Abomination, and the Genesis.
well, is Coffin Queen able to get something back at end of
Yeah.
turn as well?
I was counting her as a symbiotic worm here. But also that math was just bad, so...
And Diabolic Edict makes the math even worse for Dittert.
Oh yeah, you just sacrificed the shadow creature, right?
Yeah, probably.
I guess we'll find out.
He saw it. He saw the line. Here comes the worm.
With tanking so long on such a straightforward line makes me think that,
Ooh.
to some extent, Dittert's considering a concession.
Sylvos is an 8-power creature with trample, so
Yeah.
we can Icy Manipulator, I assume Sylvos here. Scion of Darkness, I believe, is trampling. Still keeping the Scion tapped, though.
That's taking a moment to do the math before Shrug attack with everything.
Oh, another can't be regenerated spell for the Silvos certainly makes the blocking a bit easier.
Really begs the question, what is Dittert even trying to draw to here? But it's an admirable fight to put up.
Yeah, I mean,
Triskelion is a 2/2 at the moment.
I think there's certainly consideration for getting to the point where Bats has to activate Oath, and he might just not have anything left in his deck, right?
True, but you're going to lose a couple of creatures on this block, I think, no matter what.
Sure, sure. Well, not necessarily true with the Mother. I guess the Mother of Runes is probably toast, but
Well, I assume she might protect herself.
Slightly off screen, our Triskelion looks to be lined up against the Twisted Abomination. Yeah, just don't want to forget that as we're analyzing the board.
yeah, this was kind of what I was thinking. You protect the Triskelion, who's blocking the Abomination. You shoot the token. Mother of Runes, I guess,
Not blocking.
didn't block anything. Oh, Spirit Monger.
Yeah, once this black green deck gets to this point, it's just heaters every turn. Now with Genesis back in the graveyard, it can literally be just every turn play a huge monster.
Oh, Phyrexian Rager at 1 life from Oath. Yeah, that you hate to see it.
Fantastic.
Oh, all of the hard work just to be betrayed.
Hey man, you don't have to activate Oath.
True.
So that game made it look like we want to see a faster start from Dittert, and seeing him playing a shadow creature means maybe that's possible, but it didn't look like we saw a lot from him that implied he could be the aggro.
Yeah, I think that was definitely tempered a bit by the Oath and general unwillingness to just play into it, which I can't say I blame him for, but
And indeed, he did not open with a creature on turn 2. Instead, just that Gerard's Verdict once again, to which Bats discarded an Unmask and a Forest. So Ditter did gain 3 life on that exchange, and following it up with his Stupor here, maybe he's just going a different route and really just trying to do a lot of damage to Bats' hand before he can get set up.
I'm kind of interested to see this Baron more in Dittert's deck. Do you think that's always right to play, even though he has a couple of spells that care about him having Swamp specifically?
I would be tempted to play it, I think. Premodern, you have a lot of like very basic heavy mana bases, and the mutilate we saw doesn't always need to be for max amount. Now sometimes it does, and if you have Baron in that draw, you're going to be pretty sad about it. But I think the upsides outweigh the few times that'll come up.
Skeletal Scrying here, using some of that extra life.
Both players just really playing mana rocks and passing. Maybe Dittert can get on the board here. Maybe that Triskelion again.
Bats didn't have a Genesis to discard to the Gerard's Verdict this time to really get the engine churning. Six mana feels like there's got to be something. Okay, there we go.
There's Triskelion. All right.
There's a Triskelion.
That's with an Ensep Harrow just continuing to ramp his mana.
Mm-hmm. Love seeing Triskelion in here as the first threat. Easiest to still get something off of if Bats has removal, and
or an Oath. You can kill your own Triskelion if you
exactly
don't want to play that game.
Or you can just get busy with a 4/4.
Okay.
And Tuka Shade.
and Hypnotic Spectre, so...
So now Bats is under a lot of pressure here. Faceless Butcher helps stem the bleeding a little bit, but which creature do you even hit here?
How does it interact with Triskelion?
Not well for the Triskelion player.
So he probably has to take Triskelion then, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess taking one of the other creatures uses up the Triskelion
uses the counters. Yeah, it's definitely a balance.
But he just gets hit. I guess it pretty much invalidates the Triskelion anyway, turning it down into a 1/1.
I think if he takes the Triskelion, he just gets shot in the face for 3, and neither of the other creatures care about the Faceless Butcher in play, so...
Very good point.
Back here for the decider. That's first on the board with just a Wall of Blossoms, so not super threatening here. Dittert misses the turn 2 Gerard's Verdict.
That Nantuka Shade we saw last game feels like the kind of thing we need to see. Ooh, but a Disenchant for the Mana Rock is very nice when we saw how much Bats needs to get up to a lot of mana.
Dittert probably wants that Disenchant back.
And a Phyrexian Processor. So how much life are you paying here, boys?
I've not played with that card enough. I think my number would be too low. 7 seems about right.
The Bats pick 7. I want to go 10 or more, especially given Dittert has just played a Disenchant. And game 1, that Oath stayed and played the entire game. I feel like he has very few ways, if any, to kill his processor, and I want him dead in 2 turns.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I think 10 or 7 are the numbers, but I do think 10 is defensible.
Given that the creature it makes is black, I think it is defensible to go for a higher number just because so much of Dittert's creature removal we saw can't kill black creatures. There is a concern that if you pay too much life and then he plays his shadow creature, his Hypnotic Spectre, he gets to start getting past them and can maybe kill Bats backed up by removal, but unlikely that he'll have removal for these tokens.
Yeah, and I feel like if Dittert had those creatures, some of them would have been in play already. He passed on what? He passed on 2 with Disenchant up. He passed on 3 doing nothing. Now he has a Glory on turn 5. I don't know. I'm just not that scared in Bats' seat. I think I would go bigger.
That's fair. I guess it's trying to find the danger in either situation. Here making 7s feels like it's definitely going to be good enough. How much better would it feel to be making 10s?
Yeah, we are arguing pretty small edges. And, he also has a bit of life gain here and there in Gerard's Verdict and maybe something else. So the math might have been thrown off even if he had gone for a quicker clock.
So what you're saying is it should have been even more than 10.
Just go for the 19. No guts, no glory.
Well, against your opponent who's cast Triskelion twice in the match already, that doesn't sound correct.
Don't be a coward, Joey. Hey, look at that. Triskelion.
All right, but now we have 2 7/7s, so not really sure. Of note, too, the designer of this cube has intended for it to be possible to play with some older rules, such as stacking combat damage. For this draft, we were not using those rules, so some older players might have been looking to trade off that Triskelion for one of the tokens, but that was not an option available to Dittert at this point.
Okay, well he's certainly finding some angles here.
Yeah, these pre-modern cube decks love to grind, and you're seeing 2 really solid examples of that.
Worth noting that had he paid 10 life, we would be in a slightly more precarious position here. Although probably
but at the same time, each of them would be lethal. So Carbon Guide has protection from black, though, right? So it gets a free block.
Mm-hmm. but
Yeah.
still going down to 6.
This would have been lethal if they had been 10s. So I guess that is a point in results oriented for that
But
decision.
now, Dittert has Echo to pay on this Karma Guide or not. Paying it seems pretty tough against 3 lethal threats, but now what is he drawing to?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, Mutilate doesn't even do it there. He only has 4 swamps, three swamps, something like that. He got somewhat baited into killing that mana rock, which, if Bats missed his 4th land after that, that would have felt awesome. As it was, he played land 4 and a way scarier artifact, so did not go great.
Right, and I don't think Bats had shown any artifacts that weren't mana rocks. He had played Star Compass in one of the earlier games, and in this cube in particular, you can expect an artifact or 2 to be hanging out in your opponent's deck most of the time. But if he didn't know about the processor,
yeah, I mean, the only other target that he had seen was that Oath, but if you don't see that on turn 2 or 3, I guess maybe you're not as spooked about it. But yeah, the processor there definitely a haymaker.
Also hard to be spooked about Oath of Druids in general when your opponent has wall of
yeah, exactly.
Has a wall in play.
Well, at any rate, Bats really happy to get this win here. Unfortunately, it was the only win he got in this draft. He ended up 1-3.
Yeah, Dittert ended up the same, managed to pick up a win along the way. I believe it was against me. Yeah, so Dittert also ended up 1-3 in this draft.
So that result implies that maybe some of the other decks were a bit faster, gave each of these guys some trouble. Let's see if we can check any of those out in the next match. So getting started on the second match here, it was myself against Jacob. I was playing a blue-red standstill deck, just a few man lands and standstill and a bunch of controlling elements. Scott, can you speak to what Jacob was playing here?
Yeah, Jacob was playing a red-green strategy. A little more mid-range than you might be expecting with that color combination, but he gets up to some 5 and 6 drops in the mid-game here.
And playing my deck with a bunch of mid-range counterspells, hearing that Jacob's deck is mid-range is exactly what I want to hear. I know sitting down on the day, seeing a bunch of mountains on the other side, always a chance I get aggroed out before I can leave anything up. This morph is pretty scary to me because one of the few morphs I knew of that was in the cube was the 4 toughness morph that could be turned up just by paying life. So it makes firing off a burn spell like that one somewhat scary if it just ends up getting blanked, but went for it there.
Instead, it's just Skirk Marauder.
Yeah, I think I got by it in one of my other matches, so maybe that had already happened.
Fires of Yavimaya reader over here.
Yes, actually, that's a good point with this cube in general. A lot of our players are newer to Magic than when a lot of these cards originally got played. I think that's one of the strengths of the deck I'm playing. I think it is very good against... I think it's A, very easy to draft, and B, very good against people who maybe have slightly subpar deck construction in this format. Here, a hardcast Gush, just putting me up on some cards. And I think I had a counterspell for Fires, but I, at that point in the game, was just so content on letting Jacob attempt to do things and just not letting him have any creatures instead of fighting over the Fires itself.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, even as a more mid-range build like Jacob has here, it definitely has some faster starts, although we're clearly not seeing one here. He's only played 1 creature so far that was easily dealt with, and now finally on turn 5 or 6, we have our second.
Flame Burst. And Scott, can you speak to what was going on with Flame Burst in this cube?
Yeah, so this cube was designed by Eduardo Sajkulik, and he has a couple quirks to his construction. The relevant one here being that both Flame Burst and Accumulated Knowledge, when drafted, you get 2 additional copies to include into your deck. So seeing that first one is going to set off the alarm bells that there are at least 2 more hiding somewhere.
And definitely makes me more afraid of the more aggro possible draws that Jacob could have, knowing that there are some potential burn spells that can finish me off in his deck just because of that one card he drafted.
Yeah, so I imagine you're already playing a little conservatively against this color combination, but seeing that now you're protecting your life total as much as you possibly can.
Every card that hits the table, just a reader on both
And
sides.
this is a pretty big one to read, especially with fires in play.
Which one is this?
This is Sapperling Burst. So fading 7, I believe. But he can remove a counter to make a squirrel whose power and toughness is equal to the fading counters left on it. And that
It's a Sapperling. It's Sapperling Burst.
Did I say squirrel? Sapperling.
You did.
Wow.
Yeah, this is one for the old heads. The combination of Sapperling Burst and Fires Yavimaya ended many a game back in the day.
Right, I think I would have needed to counter it there regardless, but especially with fires.
Yeah, it's enough of a threat on its own, but with fires, it just cranked up.
Here, a disc, so maybe speaks to how big a deal fires was on that, because getting to hit both of those cards with disc would have been nice if could have allowed it to sit in play for a turn, but definitely would have been a bit too dangerous.
Yeah, and your strategy reaching this point in a game, still at 20 life, I would imagine you're feeling pretty confident, at least in this first game here.
Definitely, there are some cards like the Burst that can, if they can sneak through. You can also see, I don't have a ton of blue mana, so if Jacob's able to double spell, might be able to get through any counters I have. And having the answer to disc here definitely hurts. This is some naturalize effect. I think that
it is exactly naturalized. Yeah.
Yeah. Heads up of Jacob to do it while your mainland was activated. So.
Mm-hmm.
Fairy Conclave getting red there. Another creature hiding in the lands pile.
Oh, and here we see some of the more mid-range elements. We have a Rorik's Bladewing.
Right, with only one blue mana, might be difficult to counter this. Looks like something.
Just cycling that land. Very, very eager with the Roriks there, getting right in, not even in the red zone. He went to your creature zone to attack you.
Right,
there.
he passed it over more than I needed to read it. So if I don't have a couple of burn spells to take this out, it's going to put me at that low life total we've been talking about, me being afraid of tapping an island already, so...
Avalanche Riders.
Feels a little anemic in the face of this Flying Dragon, but maybe this follow-up play will help.
Okay. That is a flying creature.
Yep.
Interesting. Threatens to block Rorik's and with the help of a burn spell possibly kill it. Frantic Freak, speaking to the other things going on with this cube, it was designed, my understanding, partially to have damage on the stack and as one of the old rules, but we weren't playing with it this time. So Frantic Freak a little bit worse than by design in this cube, or in this playthrough of this cube at least.
Certainly true, but in this board position, could potentially block Rorik's, but you're really risking a lot on those coin flips.
Right, and I take the damage very quickly. I believe I did have a burn spell in hand. I'm hoping to combine with the Ifrit. Getting one of my blue sources blown up, definitely hurtful. And a follow-up. So going for the 50-50 on the Ifrit here. I think this is probably a mistake. Should probably do so before attackers, either this turn or next.
That is a firebolt, so we can do it next turn as well.
That is fair.
So doing it post-combat at all is kind of, it's a little odd, but Here we're pointing out the echo.
Echo reminder, yeah. Something tells me you probably weren't planning on paying that anyways, so.
No. Having a 2/2 doesn't really help. And I think Avalanche Rider's presence in this game at all speaks to the fact that while I felt good about my strategy, the bottom of my playable stack definitely wasn't great. I decided to play Avalanche Riders even though I'm not an aggro deck because I want to blow up other man lands before resolving my standstill. If someone had Treetop Village or something like that, for example, it could get in the way of standstill.
So attacking with Frenetic Efreet, and then nothing to stop the Rorix coming in. Flashback Firebolt is starting to steal game one here. But we have a Circular Logic to counter the Lethal Burn spell.
Can't see the graveyard, but there is definitely more than one card in it, so.
Not sure what my thought process was on the attack there. Maybe hoping to draw a burn spell here to combo with the Efreet on the block, but
I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, it's within the realm of belief that you just have enough burn to potentially kill him from there, right? Like, on this turn, I mean.
that's fair. I did have a large amount of burn in my deck, and we see the Efreet go away, so must have lost that roll. 2 lethal attackers now.
Just feels like it's going to be a hard one to get out of.
Yeah, and just took the one threat that finally got to stick in that Rorix to. Rafello's doing some deserting here.
We're going to 1 to steal a 2/1 ground creature.
Yeah.
The times are desperate.
Oh, true. I missed that again because so much of my blue mana got blown up. That had to be done with the pain land there. Looking at my hand this long implies probably just going to game 2, and yeah, we pick it up. So on the play, game 2. I feel really good about my deck in this matchup. It's just those couple of powerful cards, the Saprolings, the Rorits. It feels like outside of the really big threats, there's not much that I have to worry about. But
it feels like you have a lot of ability to control what gets into play, but once things are in play, maybe a bit problematic outside of a couple cards.
5 toughness specifically being the issue. Like, I remember I had several 4 damage burn spells. I don't know. Oh, that's Yavimaya Elder.
Yep.
Yeah, and there were no Unholy Heats available back in the day, so this you kind of had to piece together multiple spells to get rid of 5 toughness creatures.
Mm-hmm. Intuition is a card that I think myself and others playing in more so in the modern era know is very powerful, but in a cube format, Intuition definitely much weaker. Using it here just to ensure I have my 4th land and lessen the chance that I get flooded out again this game. Not bad, but not the powerhouse play that I think I evaluated it as during the draft. Just knowing that Intuition is a card that sees play.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Efreet, and most of Jacob's high impact cards we saw cost 5 or 6 mana even. So feeling a little safe about tapping low on this turn.
Right. Expect there was a chance that Elder was going to get sacrificed, so it seemed like a reasonable turn to take off. Cycling another land there, so really got through that Intuition and cycling lands a bit of flood insurance. Looks like still have another land for the turn and just trading 2 damage back.
With all of this untapped mana, I would imagine Jacob was feeling pretty scared about playing a big threat on this turn, especially given the desertion that we saw from you towards the end of that first game. So instead opts to just attack for 2 and pass back.
And looks like that's just a burn spell, so we're just trying to be the aggro this game. 2 damage every turn with the Efreet, and going for burn spells to the face.
Yeah, Violent Eruption was that spell. Even with the fires, I imagine Jacob's not feeling great staring at this much mana.
For a big play here, Kamal Pit Fighter.
My life for desertion here. Desertion feels like it would almost end the game here.
We have the lore matchup here with Kamal versus Jessica, actually, so.
And that just sticks.
I mean, Kamal is fairly easy to kill.
Yeah, 6/1 creature, probably not the most terrifying thing, but. Yeah, and the Pyrokinesis gonna.
And I think we're saying 3 damage to Kamal, 1 damage to Elder because of the fires in play.
Yeah. So before he dies, Kamal tries to kill a Frenetic Efreet, which does happen. Pretty unlucky on Joey's part, honestly, but
Yeah, especially when I'm going for the aggro play, feels like really wanted that one to be able to hit.
yeah. So Jacob has a fires, and we'll have 7 mana available on his next turn. Joey's just got a bunch of lands, so see what's going to develop out of his hand. We didn't see a ton from Joey's deck in the way of threats, so not sure if we're going to commit to the board here.
Right. Really hoping to just, on turns where Jacob's tapped out like that, just find my standstill, even though I don't have a creature land in play yet, just get to set up to put him on the brakes.
And here that works again. This time it does not hit the board.
Yes, gone up a couple of cards off of my interaction. Definitely not stuck off blue mana this game like last game. Not sure if it made a difference last game, but hopefully not getting flooded again after putting 3 lands into the graveyard.
Prophetic Bolt may help with that a little bit.
Right, just getting, at worst, probably another burn spell, just as Jacob gets lower and lower here.
Yeah, if I'm playing this game in Jacob's seat, I am crestfallen at this point. I feel like I'm just dead, and it's only going to take a turn or two of end step burn spells to lock that in. But we'll see how the game actually plays out here. Oh, now I really think I'm dead.
Yeah.
This hammer's an interesting one for sure. I believe it's 5 mana during the upkeep to pick it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a big mana investment, but this late into the game can probably afford it.
Also have to imagine you're sitting on some sort of counter magic here, so you get those sorcery speed spells in when you can. Incinerate here.
And Jacob just picks it up.
Jacob's just done.
There.
We did have a Conclave and the Hammer in the graveyard. That's not enough mana to do all those things on that turn, but it does feel like Jacob really doesn't have a way to come back into that game.
Mm-hmm. Hammer's another one I think I overvalued during deck building, and after this draft kind of learned was not as good as I initially evaluated it. It's obviously good there, but it's so slow to pick it up and then maybe not cast it in the same turn because of wanting to leave up other interaction. Here, Seal of Fire into Standstill, a phenomenal start for me for Game 3.
Yeah, and following it up with a creature land, meaning you're going to start putting the pressure on Jacob to make a move here.
Right, definitely feel like he has to crack soon, but maybe waiting for me to start getting in with my man land, so I at least won't have mana to counter what he plays after. Though
second man land here.
I feel like especially having a second man land, I would have been in favor of me not attacking there, but it is true that I don't have much blue mana, so maybe wasn't very likely to be able to counter after standstill resolves anyway.
Yeah, and really punishing Jacob here is that the sort of level 1 optimal way to deal with the standstill is crack it with an instant on your opponent's end step, and hopefully they have to discard some of the additional cards they draw. And his deck is full of a lot of sorcery speed threats and not a lot of instants. I mean, he's got a Naturalize that doesn't do a lot on this board, the Flame Bursts maybe, but really, really not a great swath of instant speedways to crack that the standstill.
Sapperling Burst for 3 cards. Probably a pretty good trade from where Jacob's sitting. I think up to this point, he's only seen the disc that can actually take this Sapperling Burst off the table.
Yeah, sticking a burst has got to have him feeling a little bit better about this game.
Assume we're making... Looks like we're making 2 Sapperlings. Man, I did it again.
So 2, they immediately are 4/4s.
Seen a number of spells that can kill 4/4s out of Joey, but I don't think any we've seen that kill 2 at once. So probably safe to say at least one of these is getting in here.
Yeah, and you see how quickly I just take 8. I think I know this is my first time ever playing against this card. I don't know if it's Jacob's first time playing with it, but I maybe was a little too quick to take that damage, as it is tempting to deal with these Sapperlings as little as possible due to the fading weakening them. But you see here a post-combat me answering one with Prophetic Bolt. So really just, I assume, making sure I had counter magic up for whatever was going to come.
Yeah. And Jacob's follow-up was a Pillage, just destroying one of your lands, which kind of forced your 5-mana play at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a good point to reference that, much like Blasted Erm, another large threat of the time period, if you can make it so that threat doesn't kill you, you can ignore it mostly because it will go away eventually on its own. So I understand the impulse to try and not spend cards on these Sapperlings that will eventually just die off.
And you see, again, immediately reaching for the life pad, just content to take 3. That Seal of Fire I have sitting in play still meant he couldn't make another one. So here we have
Firebolt
spell.
at your face.
Firebolt
Yeah.
means effectively at 4 because that card can always flash back. So almost certainly need to use the Seal of Fire once this Sapperling becomes a 2/2.
It becomes a lot easier now, right? Because you have 2 lands who can block the squirrels profitably, plus the Seal of Fire, so...
I think Jacob's considering making one here, because if he doesn't, me using the Seal of Fire on the 2/2 effectively ends his burst, so he can at least get 1 more damage out of it, probably, by taking down. And forcing me to answer, is my Seal of Fire worth preventing 1 damage?
Between that and a 2/2 Mistress Factory, that's pretty easy to just activate and put in the way. There's not a whole lot of good lines for Jacob here at this point with this Sapling Burst.
Right, unless he draws, we talked about those Flame Bursts that are in his deck, so it looks like I choose to take 1, let that go away, content to just let the last one die when the last fading counter goes away.
Weatherseed Treefolk, another very sticky threat, pretty hard to fully deal with here, unless you counter it.
So now it's a question of how quickly can I put together some kind of threat while keeping shields up and trying to finish Jacob off before he draws those lethal burn spells. At this point, definitely regretting not using my Prophetic Bolt on one of the 4/4s before it got to deal me 4. If I was still at 9 here, it'd feel much better. Jacob putting that card in the graveyard, even though technically, it should still be in play with 0 counters on it. But
Well, coming back in to visit. Hard to imagine there not being an answer in your hand, but
well, it's
I guess we do have Seal of Fire on the table too, so maybe we just don't care.
Right. I mean, it does. Okay, it would still get to kill my Efreet, though.
Yeah.
I believe.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So is it worth the 50-50 to lose my Efreet and use the Seal of Fire, or to hold the counter spell? I decide to go with casting the counter spell. I think maybe because I want to start animating my lands to speed up the clock, and maybe not being able to leave up as much mana.
That and miscalculation, we're at the point of the game where miscalculation is going to start to lose effectiveness here.
Not a lot of value there anymore, yeah.
Okay, I missaw. I thought that was actual counterspell, but especially being miscalc, yeah. So only deciding to get in with 1 means didn't want to go down to only 3 mana. So if this is the morph we saw game 1, that can deal me 2, and the card in the graveyard can deal me 2, so that would be lethal. So I'm going to Desertion. Then I don't know if we had much of a discussion at the table of how Desertion works with morph spells.
Yeah.
Looks like we have decided, correct or not, that it is a morph on my side.
Been my assumption, but
just checking on the mana costs over there. All right, so there is a Flame Burst, so
I am dead if I don't have a counter spell for that Firebolt.
Jacob is dead here. I mean, we have 6 on the board without spending any more mana. It's not impossible.
So we have 12 damage. So any burn spell pretty much would clean it up from here.
Well, you see I'm counting out the mana. It would fully tap me out to activate all my man lands, I believe.
Oh, and to flip up the Marauder, yeah. I wasn't accounting for the mana for that.
Oh, maybe it is possible to flip it up and activate the Marauder.
Well, you can, but that takes up all of your mana at that point, so you would leave him at 2, I believe.
Yeah, you can see, was thinking there for a while. I don't know if I even had a burn spell in hand, but going through the math, if there is a burn spell in hand, gotta think, was there any chance earlier this game, because maybe was holding it for quite some turns in case a big threat came down. Was there ever a point where could have cast it?
Post-combat Avalanche Riders.
Yeah, so that was part of the math that I was doing the whole time of, well, Avalanche Riders isn't lethal, so I decided not to cast it, and then I'm like, I decided to cast it anyway, and here's the lethal Firebolt. I don't have...
Oh, no.
I don't have anything. So really, I think, as much as... I don't know if I had a burn spell that I could have fit in earlier to make that turn lethal, but the big turn really came down to not killing the Saproling when it attacked in. Obviously, we saw later that I had miscalc. I think I had the miscalc the whole time, so it could be said that if I ended up prof bolting one of the Saprolings as a 4/4 before damage, and then Jacob just cast a big spell, I would just lose. So maybe I had to play the way I did, but if I had, the way the game played out, if I had prof bolted and Jacob didn't have a better follow-up play than what he ended up doing in the pillage, then I think it would have been pretty much impossible for me to lose that game. But hard to look back. First time playing against Sapperling Burst, definitely going to take it more seriously next time, but just got by it that game.
How'd the rest of your draft go?
The rest went very well for me. My deck was set up to do this pretty well and didn't end up having to draw this dumb Avalanche Riders most of the time, so ended up 3-1 overall. This was my only loss in the draft.
And Jacob also ended with a 3-1 record, so dropping a match somewhere along the way, but mostly continuing his winning streak here.
Yeah, these decks both seem like pretty easy to see when looking at the cube. I think we saw last round some people that got maybe a little bit lost going into the cube. Let's see what kind of decks we can find going forward in our next match. So getting into the third match here, we have Bryan versus Prose. Bryan was on another blue-red deck, though his much more aggressively bent. You can see that in my match I had very few aggressive creatures. We're going to see a lot more from Bryan. Prose, as this game gets started, what are you working with on that side?
Yeah, I opened Pack 1, Pick 1 Mirari's Wake in this draft and never really looked back, so ended up with a Bant Mirari's Wake deck. Fair number of big mana spells, few ways to find Mirari's Wake, and hopefully enough pieces to hang on until we get there.
So, fun fact for the viewers, Prose and Scott are two of the older members of our group, so they actually know what a lot of these cards are and have played with these cards before. Both of you, I know, highly value Mirari's Wake. After playing this cube a couple of times, do you guys maintain that your understanding of that card being very powerful, or has it fallen a little?
I still think it's quite strong. I drafted it the next time we drafted this cube, and I also got it very early in pack 1, I think second pick overall. And I think that is important to drafting these decks because you need to know that you're getting that payoff.
Right.
But when you get to the board state where you can land a Mirari's Wake and have a land or two up to counter their best play when you tap low, and then you untap and just slay them, huge creatures or X spells, it's quite powerful.
So yeah, Bryan's come out pretty blazing out of the gates here. 3 creatures. I did have a humility to lessen the blow on the previous turn, but complicate countering the bottle gnomes there. Definitely not what I wanted to see.
All right, Cloud of Fairies into Mog Flunkies presents pretty much as aggro as Bryan's deck can get. The Grim Lavamancer also threatening to, in the later game, be able to finish off the last few points if he can get in for a little bit more now.
Yeah, and Thran Dynamo not the best answer to all of this.
Yeah, in most cubes, your opponent untapping with the ability to go up to 8 mana is pretty scary. Not sure, haven't seen yet from Prose what he could have to really take advantage of all that mana.
Bryan with an accumulated knowledge over there.
A bigger problem too is that Bryan is sort of built a wide board here.
Yeah, so with the Lavamancer and the Prodigal Sorcerer taking me to 5. CGN Commander, probably not what I wanted to see at 5 life.
Wide board gets even wider.
Yeah.
And now we're sort of looking like you need to kill all the creatures with 1 card, or probably going to be the end of the game.
Ooh, what is this?
So there's one of those big mana spells, cycling the Decree of Justice to make a bit of an army, although with the Cloud of Fairies and the ping capabilities over there, we'll see how effective they are. Looks like there's 4 or 5 of them.
Right. If you aren't able to answer Bryan's creatures that are able to deal you extra damage, then you are dead as soon as he untaps. So, got to see some kind of good answer.
Putting all of them on the flunkies there as any of them getting killed, well, 2 of them getting killed would have kept the flunkies alive. So
And the active prodigal sorcerer being the key weapon Bryan has in that spot. And then unable to answer the wide board, the game ends quickly thereafter.
Siege Gang was interesting to see there. I wonder how much Bryan was in on goblins outside of that to maybe allow Siege Gang a little bit extra ammunition. I don't think it needs it most of the time, but curious to see. It looks like Bryan's on a mulligan to 4.
yeah, Bryan was quite low this game. I am on a mulligan, but only to 6. But the goblin theme continues.
Right. Interesting. I mean,
Quickly continues as well.
a lot of the red aggressive cards from this older era of Magic are goblins, so maybe it's coincidental. I imagine a lot of the red creatures in the cube are
I think it certainly
goblins.
helps that a lot of the decks in this format of Premodern are, the red deck is heavy goblins, so it's I think it's likely that there are good red creatures outside of them. They just aren't as featured in the
Right.
format.
Just curious if there's any other payoffs to having a lot of goblins other than siege gangs, incidental, being able to sacrifice them.
So all it took was a mulligan to 4 from Bryan and a little bit of ramp, but
Right, you're up to a lot of mana very quickly. So if you have Mirari's Wake here, we saw 1 token generator last game and a mana outlet. Did you have any other token makers to combo with it? I see white mana, so possibly Battle Screech or something similar.
no token makers, but there were a number of large payoff creatures. There's an Iridescent Angel, Phantom Nishoba, I believe, was in my deck. So a lot of those payoffs are just giant creatures that are going to be really hard for decks to answer.
Lightning coming after the Wood Elves, which meta rewind. So no change to the board here.
Rewind, very interesting here as it's genuinely just a good counterspell in this format, but having it with Mirari's Wake threatening to generate a bunch of mana as well.
I believe Wake is in my hand. I'm interested why it didn't get cast last turn.
Saw at least complicate out of Bryan, so maybe we're just don't want to run it into a counterspell when you have the time here to use 18 life and your opponent has 2 cards in hand.
Bryan taking his last opportunity to kill the Wood Elves there while it was still a 1-1 with Mirari's Wake on the stack. But with Wake resolved, got to be feeling pretty good here.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy back.
And here's that's the setup right there. Wake with a counterspell. Buying back Forbid against an opponent who mulligan to 4 has got a. Bryan cannot be feeling good about this game.
Any number of options over there. So yeah, there's that Iridescent Angel. Protection from all colors, probably not a very exciting line of text for Bryan to read. Yeah. They're just odd mana costs, yeah. All right, well, accumulated knowledge from Bryan. Maybe help him start digging out of the hole. But again, not sure how many answers there are to this angel. Although it's still at 20 life, so has a oh.
But just concedes because with you still
Yeah.
at 18 there, it's just so unlikely he's able
Right.
to get in enough other
I guess it's
damage
a
before the
4-turn
angel
clock,
kills him.
and he knows he's also under Forbid, so Thawing Glacier is probably not the place I really want to be starting against Bryan's deck here, but it was a really important part in my deck throughout this draft. So,
And of note, Bryan's playing an aggressive deck, but we saw Jacob have Kamal, Roritz, a lot of the top end stuff. So we know if Bryan's going to be able to get an aggro kill, it's not because of the big creatures he's finishing with. It's because of these 1 and 2 drop creatures at the bottom of his curve.
Goblin Bombardment here.
Right. Bryan's draw seems a little bit awkward overall, having to open on Forgotten Cave as his first land, meaning he's a little bit slower to the board with these 1-drops. But Goblin Bombardment, great in the face of any removal that Prose is able to put together. So we talked in the first game about Bryan's ability to finish people off late using little incidental damage. Goblin Bombardment threatens the same.
Sunscape Familiar there. Another card that I wasn't sure about but turned out great. Makes your green and blue spells cost 1 less, so made a high number of cards in my deck cheaper. Although not going to get to hang out here.
The familiar is definitely tough to use because of how there isn't a ton of mana fixing in this cube. So if you're discounting colorless cost, you're getting down to just colored cost, and that can be somewhat restrictive sometimes. But Thawing Glacier and the rest of your ramp seems like it sets you up to not have that be as frequent of an issue.
Right. Quirion Elves here, another aid in the mana fixing department that the lands weren't providing.
Well, but missing a land drop that turn, it looks like. So
no, I replayed the Thawing Glaciers. I had picked it up at the end of Bryan's turn.
Oh, my mistake. I thought that had been the previous turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so yeah. Which foolish of me to not just do it now while I'm already shuffling, but
Right.
I
Doesn't
don't
have
think
a
there's any
ton of
cards left in
ability
his
to
graveyard, so
fill his graveyard. Yeah. I need to save. Even if he did have cards, better to save those to answer your other creatures than to waste them to deal 1 extra point of damage over what attacking would do.
Grizzly Fate here. Make some bears.
If Lavamancer had more fuel, wouldn't feel as bad about that, but maybe a little bit tough. Grizzly Fate has flashback as well, correct?
Yeah.
But it's like really expensive?
5 or this one's 5. I believe it's 7.
Treachery to steal a bear.
Yeah,
Just trying to get
flashback
him
is
out of the
7.
way.
And Threshold actually makes 4 of the bears as well. But
Oh, that's right.
very treacherous bear, apparently. Just gonna throw it at me with Goblin Bombardment here, and then
Deals 3 damage overall that turn instead of offering to trade the bears, dealing less damage, but using, I guess, the same resources.
I remember this game now because I am staring at a Wrath of God in my hand when I have just gotten Forest with my Thawing Glaciers this entire game, and I believe cannot cast it.
And we're representing 1 damage off the Sorcerer, and if we sack Sorcerer plus Pup, that's 2 more, plus exiling them is 2 more. So we have 5 damage on board, and can even attack with the Pup first before doing any of that. So
yeah, I'm just gonna pick him up there. But yeah, watching that game again, I specifically do remember that being the game that I was very haphazard with my thawing glaciers fetches, and yeah, just died staring at Wrath of God in my hand. So yeah, don't be haphazard. There you go.
still would have been rough taking 3 damage in response to the Wrath, but
Yeah,
would have
but
given
yeah,
you the chance to fight through it.
right. Well, the could potentially have even gotten casted earlier in that game. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was kind of how my entire draft went that day. I did end up going 0-4 with this deck. I really felt like I was missing the counter spells and I guess the sort of board control that you see in a lot of these other decks. So you asked how I feel about the power level of Mirari's Wake overall. I think it's still very powerful. I think you just have to, get the pieces to live until you get there, which I didn't necessarily have here.
Mm-hmm. Bryan ended up going overall just 2-2 on the day, only managing to win 1 other match. As I mentioned at one point, him not having the really top end of the aggro meant that once people did stabilize with a couple of creatures against him, it was very hard for him to keep playing those games, as we saw in game 2, conceding pretty early to just an even-ish life totals, but just being slightly behind on board. So wasn't quite able to finish out that many more. But let's check out now our last match of this cube. And in our final match, we have Matt here, who is playing the blue-black Reanimator deck. We saw a lot of the big reanimation things in our first match between Bats and Dittert, so we know that Matt maybe won't have all the pieces he's looking for in his Reanimator strategy. But Scott, as we're getting started, why don't you tell us what you have going on the other side?
Yeah, so when I put together this cube list, one of the main things I was curious about was how well supported the Blue-Green Madness cards would be. And I opened my first pack in this draft and was staring at a pretty weak pack with an Aquamoeba in it. So I just slammed the Aquamoeba and went in, and I am drafting Blue-Green Madness with Survival.
Interesting. I also, it's one of the few strategies that I feel like I have my bases on for drafting it. So I did also, you saw the circular logic in my deck. Definitely had my eye out for those cards as well, but makes sense that I didn't see very many of them if you were on it this early on.
Yeah, and here this was tutor up a Squee Goblin Nabob, I believe, and then I discard that as well to get a Wall of Roots.
This is a brutal combo for Matt, though. Helm of Possession threatening to take control of a creature, and then Recurring Nightmare to sacrifice it. So, difficult to imagine, Scott, you can get any kind of creature to stick until you figure out a way around one of these cards.
There's definitely a couple of powerful engines on both sides of the board here. We've got Survival with Squee and Helm of Possession with Recurring Nightmare. Although I don't believe Matt has anything to Recurring Nightmare back at present, so
He just plays the land and passes, so I'm gonna go Survival in again here.
And you mentioned early picking a card that would have been a possible discard outlet that we know now Matt doesn't have in his deck.
Mm-hmm.
Just more and more things that maybe Matt would have hoped could get around the table to him, as Aquamoeba seems great in this kind of deck.
I also have a Morph creature.
Mana
Matt
War.
just plays a Mana War, so this is like an information play. He's gonna get to see what my Morph is. Unfortunately for him, it's the naturalized Morph, so I get to take out that Recurring Nightmare before he can do anything with it.
And then Tuco Vigilante, and it's now bounced to your hand, which
Right, which is threatening that Helm of Possession right exactly this turn because I have another land.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Only being able to activate it last turn because of Wall of Roots, but you find the land.
Yeah. Matt is just using up these counters since I'm getting this wall back soon. So finds a Fact or Fiction. His draw is feeling a little action light, so this seems like a pretty important card for him to have found. And we see Massacre.
Interesting to see him pay full price though for this.
Yeah, with the wall, that is. Yeah.
3 lands in the pile, probably not what he wanted to see here.
Yeah, so the question here is, do I want to give him Infestation and 2 cards, which means a zombie right away, sort of making the Massacre the weaker pile somewhat, even though Massacre is the card that's probably the most impactful out of those 5.
Although we do have an onboard answer right now for the Massacre in the Vigilante, but
well, only if he plays into it. I mean,
right.
If he just taps out for Massacre here, yeah, I'll kill it. But Matt is much savvier than that.
Stopping again after you get the wall back, considering using Survival there, but no reason to do it there since it would kill the wall anyway.
I don't
and if I wait till my turn, I get Squee back. So
I don't believe that you can actually, because Matt already activated it that turn. I don't know that changing player control resets that limitation. I would assume.
Oh, sure.
But
sure.
That makes sense. I haven't read Wall in a long time, so
even if I had the option, it doesn't make sense to do it end step. I don't think for any reason. So
a lot of action this game so far, but that some of the first damage we've seen.
Mystic Snake.
Oof. Is that a treetop village also in play? So a fair amount of damage now being threatened on Matt if we want to go for it. Though he has a Volrath stronghold, it looks like, so could put a creature back on top at end of turn.
Yeah, he could, if he values this Massacre enough, he could just jam that every turn until it works. Other than that, we haven't seen too many creatures that... I mean, he's got Manowar too.
I think Matt's got to feel good, though, in general, that this Survival doesn't seem like it's been activated that much.
Memory lapse for the Massacre.
Puts it back on top already. Don't even need the stronghold.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to play a tempo game here and beat it down before this Massacre can really rip my board apart. Also have a Waterfront Bouncer in play now to further complicate things.
Complicate was in Bryan's deck.
Still not getting in with the Treetop Village, though.
I got to imagine that signals some strength from my hand. Lots of things I want to use my mana on instead of putting him to 4 life.
Another morph.
What could this one be?
Could be anything. Anything with morph, I guess. I guess we'll find out.
Manowar. Well, only if he targets it. He did. This is that zombie cutthroat.
The one I mentioned earlier, being afraid of with all my burn spells. Definitely interesting to see a bunch of morphs in the survival deck. You can end up telegraphing what morph you have. Ooh, Upheaval. Okay.
Yeah, a bit of a game reset here.
Wall of Roots, though, and some other cheap creatures definitely don't feel the worst if this resolves.
Yeah, not the most powerful upheaval I've ever seen, but it is going to presumably...
I mean, we have lethal if we counter it, so I assume we don't have a counter. Maybe this is just a think on if we activate survival at all. The decision is no activations of survival.
Do a little discarding.
Float either. It seems like I could just slam the Mystic Snake back into play and just attack.
Oh, interesting.
Not really sure what I was doing there.
I think maybe so lost in thinking about survival lines, I would assume, that just missing that play in the moment. But yeah, Mystic Snake to attack just a few times would have been nice here, especially since we know like his answer he would presumably have to play into it would be interesting choice to discard Wall of Roots here. When his answer would be Mana War, which would be a reset on it.
There's the Aqua Amoeba.
Different 2-drop in Aqua Amoeba.
Which just gets Mana Ward here.
Yeah.
Mana War doing a lot of work this game.
Aqua Amoeba coming down again. Master Core, definitely a lot scarier now than it was before. Though, once again, it seems like our naturalized morph has been reset, assuming we didn't discard it.
Yeah, didn't catch everything that got discarded there, but...
I don't know if Matt kept Volrath's Stronghold through his discard of a bunch of cards. Doesn't look like it's made its way back into play yet, at least.
Ignite the follow-up.
So Aqua Amoeba doing some good defensive work.
Oh, end step, I've got a 4/4, which is nice. It cost me my Aqua Amoeba, but maybe I can make some headway here. Morph.
True.
Thinking about a double block here, maybe? No?
Taking it down to 3.
The decision to go for that before doing the morph trick was just based on wanting to Bone Shredder. Pretty scary here. Just because of how low Matt was, but losing that value of the Aqua Amoeba by having to go for it first.
Now, activating Treetop Village looks okay on this board, but not great. That Black Knight has a clean block on the 3/2 Vigilante there.
And Bone Shredder's going to go to the graveyard anyway.
Yeah. Matt showing a pretty scary Recurring Nightmare setup.
Oh, yeah.
I killed it earlier this game, but like...
There's a Rushing River to just bounce the 2 blockers. Which, yeah.
And that's the game.
Yeah, lots of good Recurring Nightmare creatures on Matt's side of the table.
Yeah, and it's rare that you get a window to hit it with a Naturalize. It's usually just in play and then back in their hand immediately. So potentially pretty scary mid-game for Matt.
Black Knight, we saw at the end of that game, not a card I would expect him to want to be playing in the main deck. Mana's not great, as we've mentioned in this cube, so not being guaranteed any ability to find it early. And doesn't do much in this matchup, so hopefully he had enough cards to sideboard in that he was able to take it out.
So quick couple first turns there, but Matt cycled an Undead Gladiator and then used its ability to discard a Chroma Angel of Wrath, so... Oh, followed up with Death, so here comes a Chroma. Yeah.
I saw this cycling, didn't realize it meant this was about to happen.
Yeah, so I'm put to the question really fast. I did show a few different options to bounce creatures, so I don't feel like the game is over at this point, but I'm being put to the test about as quick as you can in this cube.
Chroma, shockingly not the easiest creature in the world to answer either.
Gonna bounce the morph. We are countering it with something. Probably Memory Lapse would be my guess. And a Wild Mongrel. Manwar again. That's the Morph. It's that Cutthroat. Actually better, just as a 2/2 colorless creature. And Animate Dead.
Deranged Hermit. Yeah, Matt, I assume pointing out that Animate Dead on a Chroma, not the best target there. Yeah.
And Dead. All right, well that makes sense.
Yeah, that was certainly a quick set of cards there from Matt to put that game in a bag.
Indeed, one of the most convincing games I've seen with this cube. Wild Mongrel, I think it's clear you have the right enablers. I don't know if we've seen the best.
Once again, discarding the squee to it.
Oh, wow.
That's free real estate right there, baby. Take 3 damage.
Seeing the Vigilante, probably not what Matt loves here.
What's he gonna do? Not play his Mastercore? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, not play as Mastercore, Recurring Nightmare, Helm of Domination, Animate Dead. Yeah.
Two? No. 3.
All right. Well, there's a Braids.
Braids. Interesting.
So
another card that Squee could be incredible against if you could somehow get it into play, but
yeah, no ability to add red mana to my mana pool in this deck, I don't believe. So
besides Squee and the Worm, is there anything else that you're really looking to discard?
Elephant Guide.
I did not. I missed a lot on the payoffs to Madness. You take sneaking that complicate for me. I don't know what happened to the Bastion Root Walla. I'm pretty confident it was in the draft, but it just did not get back to me.
Just gonna let it trade with the Braids.
Didn't want to discard any more cards to it.
Presumably, we had Squee, right? So we would have had to only discard one more card, but I don't know. Doesn't look like we have
One
many
more
cards
card
left in our hand.
to trade, but
yeah, two more.
Two more cards to keep my guy, which seems like it might have been good, but hard to say when I don't know what's in my hand currently.
Yeah. It looks like 3 cards might have been your entire hand at the time, which...
Yeah, so he blocks with his Manowar and puts it right back on top, which would deal with this Elephant Guide nicely, but I have a counterspell of some kind.
Exclude.
Oh.
I was going to say, that was going to be the perfect answer to Elephant Guide, but getting to shut down. Though, if he's able to put it on top again...
Yeah, Matt does have his Stronghold going, so it's going to be something I need to answer at some point here.
There's that Undead Gladiator. Probably not going to do anything as cool as it did in the first game.
Second, right?
Second game, yeah, you're right, sorry.
And I'm bouncing it.
Matt's showing capsize.
He's showing me a capsize. He doesn't have double blue.
Yeah.
It's a little post end of the game.
Pack it up.
Complaint equity there.
Right. Talking about how maybe was going to have trouble with Black Knight, but it's double of the other color that does Matt in at the end of that match. Though that was the only one he ended up dropping. We saw that his deck is capable of powerful things, and his record shows it as he went 3-0 in his other matches for a total of 3-1 at the end of that draft.
Yeah, and I also ended up with a 3-1 record. My deck operated like we saw more often than not, but it just happened to fumble pretty spectacularly 2 games in a row in one of my matches. I don't even remember who I lost to, honestly, but
So that will wrap up our matches for the Premodern Cube in this event. With 2 drafts in the books, we have standings as you see on the screen with Matt, Scott, Jacob, and Joey, each with 5 wins, Bats with 4, Dittert and Bryan with 3 wins, and Prose with 2 wins. Next up is the Peasant Cube draft, so keep an eye out for that coming soon. If you are interested in any more info about this draft or the league in general, check out the description panel for links to the cube, as well as links to all of our socials and Discord if you want to keep an eye on what we're up to lately. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you next time.